So it's been a hot minute since I covered anything directly Dead Space related. Nearly half a decade, in fact, with my third ever Why You Wouldn't Survive video. After beating the remake twice and overhearing some online discussion, a question came to mind. Do the Necromorphs of the Dead Space franchise count as zombies? It's in a very gray area, more so than the typical zombie v infected. But can we rope the spacefaring biomass-driven Necromorphs into the same section as a zombie? I put up a poll on the YouTube community page and my Twitter, and the results were either kinda close or extremely tight. People love to classify creatures and monsters within certain groups for ease of discussion and or scientific research. And who doesn't love overly explaining fictitious media in a biological and or survival-like fashion than I and my brother in swole arms, Roanoke Gaming. Today, we are discussing, are Dead Space's Necromorphs zombies or not? Today's video will be a bit of a short form, two sides arguing their case. With I, Zach S, aka Wildsuch Gaming, proficient in zombie history, lore, and studies into game development, on the side of the Necromorphs not considered zombies, while Roanoke Gaming, more proficient in both microbiology and overall science stuff, as well as the lore and anatomy of Dead Space, should be considered zombies. So get your markers out and let's get reanimating, shall we? So to start things off, I'll go ahead and state why the Necromorphs shouldn't be labeled as zombies. When you think of what constitutes a zombie, what do you think of? The usual answer is the reanimated dead or corpses brought back to life, with the addendum of eating the flesh and or brains of the living, but most importantly is their similarity to the people they were before. The purpose and physiology of a Necromorph is a bit more complicated than that of a zombie though. The Necromorphs are post-human abominations whose anatomy has been rearranged in a highly efficient manner, but aren't directly just a dead body coming back to life. Rather, a threat stemming from an amalgamation of more and more biomass, creating a hive mind network thanks to a telepathic entity. Technically speaking, in terms of their conceptual creation, things can also be construed in a literal sense. Former visceral designer Ben Wannett said the term necromorph, coined by his wife randomly one night, is just simply put as dead and change. It accentuates the critical point of the Necromorphs. They are the dead, but changed beyond just coming back to life, as well as to serve a greater purpose. Yes, they do look to infect people and force them to join their ranks, but that is where the similarities with the typical zombie stops. When I think of a zombie, I think of a literal mindless drone set with one task in mind, and that is to spread the infection. And hell, the original definition of zombie before the horror genre got hold of it was just that. A subservient, speechless, willless puppet mindlessly going on with its existence basically in autopilot. When you think of a zombie, you think of the droning hordes ravenously walking or running towards the nearest jingling meat keys together to consume and infect. There isn't a grander design or precursor to these efforts. There is nothing driving them besides just the one goal. They are just a machine with no give until they are ultimately put down by destroying the brain or removing the head. I would like to say how the Necromorphs deviate from these key factors. They are a result of the indoctrinating efforts of the ancient markers emitting wavelengths to control the masses, to bend normal people's will through any means necessary, using images of loved ones, voices in their heads to crack their mental faculties, and oh so much more to bring tons of people to a cult-like level to usurp important civilized organizations and hierarchies to spread its influence until eventually they either kill in the marker's name or are killed. Once dead bodies have been accumulated, the signals emitted by the markers will mutate the flesh of the dead into many different forms of the Necromorphs using their biomass. It's not really an infection that invades the brain, mind you, but rather a virus that hijacks every single organic cell into overtime to cause the connected biomass to become a violent vessel to outright kill organisms to harvest their flesh. The marker haphazardly converts bodies into the most improvised but violent forms their frames could possibly allow, hence why the most basic form, the slash slasher are what people would say are zombies with broken and twisted arms, torso, and legs to make their every motion fatal. But unlike zombies, removing the head does not necessarily stop their onslaught, as systemically removing each appendage and limb is the only legitimate method of stopping singular forms. The creature doesn't necessarily die like a zombie would, the brain has been shut off so the body stops moving. No, the marker decides to cut functions to that entity since most of its lethality has been neutralized. Once you have destroyed many of the limbs, well, the marker doesn't see any worth in it, and the marker will basically flip the internal kill switch. So the marker sees it as better to shut it off for now and continue to gather resources and information. The biomass from these dead units, though, is also still available for the Necromorphs to come back to later to use in this amalgamation, instead of just rotting in a corner like any other zombie. Now, the biomass from all types of life forms being potential for making all sorts of different variations of different Necromorphs, rather than a virus relying on pre-existing or environmental conditions to create special variants. The marker consistently works with the biomass readily available in every location to more effectively attack survivors swiftly and defiantly. Using infectors to infect dead bodies, they find and eventually drag the biomass of the dead into piles to create stronger variants, a beefier mental network to command the Necromorphs for more coordination, and eventually serve the greater purpose of the marker. Using as much life as possible to fuse it all together in order to create the godlike asteroid-sized Brethren moons with the intent of consuming all organic matter in the galaxy. You can make the argument that the mental faculty hijacking of the marker is the infection at first, the precursor before the space zombies come into the picture. Once these undead are cropping up though, do these reanimated corpses start walking and start infecting, making zombies akin to what we are familiar with. Considering the marker's capabilities at understanding us, it's basically the marker serving two purposes: to whittle us down, to wear us down physically with nightmarish slaughter, but also to provide imagery within our heads that tricks us into wanting to join the marker's influence, and that of creating genetic abominations that fall in line with our preconceived notions of an undead person. Basically, it's using the most horrific element of the zombie narrative, seeing former friends, family, and loved ones as these ravenous undead, using that aspect but in its own unique way, by exploiting the human subconscious. Using the mental imagery and physical imagery to wear you down to make you snap so you can be a living indoctrinated foot soldier for the marker, either as a living person or as an abomination, but the marker and its ultimate goal only has these slashers and infectors as temporary foot soldiers along the way as it dredges towards its ultimate goal. And those most basic form of the foot soldiers, like the slasher, are just fragmented forms of what you would label a zombie, but ultimately the Necromorphs are way more than what their few basic forms are. On the surface, yeah, I could easily see how you could view a necromorph as just simply zombies. But hell, even looking at what media and games inspired their design philosophy, like John Carpenter's The Thing, System Shock, and Resident Evil 4, most of which refrain from zombie archetypes in favor of biomass infections, melting people to bend their shape and form into monstrous beasts, or infections that bend the will of people but retain some of their humanity. I mean, look at The Thing. You don't look at one of John Carpenter's creatures and say, oh, that thing? Yeah, that's a zombie. No, that's a thing. Hell, the Necromorphs in their transformative capabilities over the course of 3 games are more in line with The Thing. The Necromorphs go off of signals relayed by their developing hive mind network that only grows in strength with the more biomass it accumulates in order to improvise a horrific aesthetic to optimize both a terrifying appearance and a lethal attack pattern or strategy. Yes, the idea of the zombie is there, but that is just the basics of it. Bottom line, the Necromorphs aren't zombies, and if my ramblings through everything I just stated about how they deviate so heavily from the one note, all we want to do is eat your brain's corpse aesthetic, the Necromorphs are not easily wiped out by head injuries, but rather tedious dismemberment. They don't uniformly go after prey if the marker doesn't command it. They are a beehive of organic cell orgies wrapped up in a cesspool of cannibalization and mutilation so that each piece of meat does not go unused for the marker's rising brethren. Zombies just want to eat or spread the infection. There is a greater goal. The marker wants to make these brethren moons to wipe out all organic life in the galaxy, much like Halo's Flood. And for humans to even try and fight back, their mental faculties will be shattered time and time again along the way via indoctrinating sonar waves that won't stop until organic life is all but consumed. The art director for Dead Space puts it pretty eloquently enough when it comes to their threat and summarizes what I'm saying while keeping the mystery of their intents encapsulated.
They want to use you in a way that's not right, that adds another layer of like intimacy and wrongness and relationship to the whole thing that makes it so much more scarier than mindless killers.
And that ain't no zombie I ever heard of. What? Do zombies come back from the dead and eat flesh? Yes, but do zombies have a hive mind network they use to slap that flesh together to haphazardly make abominations of nature in a flash to make you go insane telepathically, all while a big-ass moon constructs above your head to eat all organic life? What? Zombies, motherfucker! Does that sound like some kind of zombie thing to you? No, it sounds more like the thing to me, or Halo's Flood, or maybe even a bit of Mass Effect's Reapers. Now we're getting somewhere. What do some of the devs have to think?
There's two explanations for Necromorph. Long version is it's part of this alien virus that kind of comes out of the planet when people start cracking it open. Short version, it's space zombie.
Now don't go simplifying it after all that over explanation I just did. Quit it!
Well, basically Dead Space is using sort of zombie lore and zombie canon in our own way. With the reanimated flesh of the dead crew, we're sort of invoking very traditional zombie ideas.
A zombie is a machine. It's a biological guided weapon. That is what's so terrifying.
Okay, this is starting to feel like we're getting to the part of the video where it sides with the Necromorphs being zombies. I'm out.
The coolest thing about the Necromorphs is that they're not traditional zombies. You have to learn about them. You have to figure out what they are and how to kill them.
Well, with that being said, I think we have our bridge into the thoughts of Roanoke, so take it away, brother.
Shut up. What are zombies? If we look towards the definition of these creatures, we will find that in voodoo itself, they are a mute and willless body robbed of its soul and given a semblance of life by supernatural forces, usually used for manual labor or some evil purpose. This would be the original terminology until movies, games, and TV shows came in and began to screw with the understanding. As we all know, typically what we see in today's day and age are infected people. These people's purpose is to eat others of the same species and further the infection by secondary consequences. Those being someone bitten and then escaping only to succumb to the infection itself. As time has passed, the idea of the zombie itself has been inadvertently combined with the term infected, calling into question if we could really call the necromorphs that we see in Dead Space legitimate zombies or something else. I'm here to argue that they could and should be considered zombies for several reasons, relating to how their initial infection begins, which involved in a takeover of a person, all the way to the Brethren Moons. And to understand this, we need to know how everything begins. The first piece of the puzzle that to a human species would appear to be pure evil is going to be the marker touching down on Earth. This relic with genetic coding instructions carved into its surface of the marker itself would touch down and immediately begin influencing species all around it, guiding and shaping, at least on our planet, the mammalian branch of life that would give rise to humanity. The area of effect of the marker has also robbed anything of its sanity and their own will by an unknown force that our species has yet to fully understand. The marker actually works a lot like the light lures on deep sea fish, drawing animals in to investigate what this is before jaws of some larger creature snap shut on them. While that is the nature of an animal, the nature of what created the marker appears to be to grow a sapient race only to destroy them at their height and assimilate them. In doing so, the person will be changed as they spend more and more time near the marker, which has a profound effect on their bodies, including their immune systems. It is well known in Dead Space lore that it's not just the marker that is imposing on the lifespan of humans, but a tangible and infectious form of life simply known as a type of viral bacteria. The reasoning behind it being called a viral bacteria is that it is most definitely an altered form of prokaryote. Whether it originated from Earth or not is unknown, but I would suggest that it probably has. Much like how humans can be altered genetically by the marker, so too can the bacteria within our guts. This initial infection, which is able to run rampant, will begin overwhelming the body of the original person exposed to the marker signal. It's known as a briny, yellowish liquid that's highly infectious. As their immune responses are disrupted by the signal assaulting their bodies, increasing cortisol levels, disrupting sleep to dangerous levels, and pretty much inhibiting their ability to eat, their bodies would begin to break down, allowing this viral bacteria to invade the rest of their cells. From here, this is where they change. So it should be noted that not unlike, say, the T virus, for instance, it will change their actual cellular DNA. This genetic coding within their bodies is the main component altered by this infection. As it is, their tissue is reorganized, making them more effective at infecting others with the same disease. The infector will go out and begin cracking through skulls of humans to create the slashers. In other ways, which are not seen in-game, leapers can also be created, but I think where the argument that they are not zombies comes up is that they can form larger creatures such as the Brute, the Tripod in Dead Space 2, and even larger creatures past that such as the Hive Mind, and eventually the Brethren Moon. And because of this, they are precluded from receiving the moniker zombie. But therein lies the issue. All the hierarchical structures are in place to give these creatures a textbook definition of zombie. The argument being made to the counter is that they are in fact not zombies because they are controlled by something humans do not understand. They are willless bodies, controlled by something else. But again, that is the exact definition of a zombie according to Voodoo. There is a supernatural force reanimating them, and I believe it could be argued that with humans currently not understanding the marker, which very likely hails from another dimensional race, using the Brethren Moons as a physical representation of themselves in our plane of existence, that this is most definitely a supernatural force humanity is contending with that is also altering the bodies of those who have succumbed. I believe it could also be argued the Necromorphs themselves are most definitely being used as a force to impose the will of the Brethren Moons for their end, which we would interpret as very probably evil. But it goes further even past the Voodoo explanation and crosses more over into the modern explanation of what zombies are. When a person is infected with a T virus once again, they are still alive while the virus also has the capability to reanimate dead cells. If we are to consider this to be a zombie, even with all the changes to the host and subsequent infections, then the reanimation of dead tissue via the marker signal would follow the same designations. Along with this, if infected with the viral bacteria and remaining alive and changing over time, such as with the hunter whose brain had necromorph tissue implanted into it by Dr. Mercer, which contained the viral bacteria, then this is simply an alteration of living tissue which still falls in line with the modern zombie designation as well. So there is nothing that can really be argued that separates them from being called a zombie apart from the size of some of the later variants and what they can achieve, and this is more simply put as like a progression of the disease. We've seen a lot of zombie media. You have your basic infected forms or reanimated forms, and given enough time, something worse typically emerges, or the standard forms remain the only threat you really have to worry about, but those are really the only two options. But it is seen that there usually is a progression. Both are true in the Dead Space universe. A hive mind is not a guaranteed thing. If enough biomass is not achieved, the Necromorphs will remain as slashers, leapers, and infectors as long as the marker is still around. And if the only thing currently dictating their will, such as the marker, is destroyed, they will fall into a slurry of genetic material onto the ground. They will never progress past this point, meaning they are basically just zombies with scythes and bigger teeth. Which, by the way, it has been noted that leapers will absolutely snack on a corpse if it finds one, much like any other infected or zombie might. If there is enough biomass, the infection will progress into later stages, creating more and more larger monsters because the tissue itself has been changed in terms of what it is able to link up with and how it is able to operate. To really clarify that statement, they confuse with other tissue from another body, which we have seen in other zombie-based media being the standard, so why not with necromorphs? To base your idea on what a zombie is on the definition of zombies rather than just appearance, I think it becomes very clear that necromorphs, being reanimated dead tissue and even altered living tissue controlled by something else, will absolutely still eat a corpse and infect others, are absolutely textbook definitions of zombies. While their later variants may be alarming, the reality is they're only alarming to humans because of our size. If we were the size of whatever these creatures are that control the Brethren Moons, as the markers had to come from somewhere, we would all likely agree that yeah, it's just zombies with one central thing having control over the entire outbreak, passively at first and more consciously once the attention of the Brethren Moons has been gained. And that's why I believe Necromorphs should be considered zombies, because they basically fill all of the requirements, I guess, or checkboxes to be called zombies, and the only reason they're really not is because they look a little more strange than average. But with all the other media that we have calling everything zombies, even if they're 7 feet tall giant monsters, they're still zombies, but just an altered form of zombies. I think Necromorphs are absolutely considered zombies.
Thanks, Roanoke, for swinging by and showing how wrong you are. Roanoke might have gotten more scientifical than I, but there's something we all know, right? It's that
Science is a liar sometimes. I won't change my mind, because I don't have to, because I'm an American.
And jokes aside, thanks for pleading the case for why the Necromorphs should be considered zombies. I'll stick to the idea that they are not, though. What side of the zombie political aisle do you lean on? Ultimately, you get to answer with the facts laid out in front of you to the question, are Dead Space's Necromorphs zombies or not? Let us know down in the comments and settle this debate once and for all. Voice your thoughts and opinions, and maybe we could do this again with Halo's Flood in the near future with another guest I have in mind. Remember to donate to my Patreon or be a YouTube channel member to be included on this list here in the future. And until next time, I'm Zackass, aka Wow Such Gaming, with the buffed up bro Roanoke, and never forget to stay happy, stay healthy, and stay well.